Welcome to Resilient Waters, Healing in the 10,000 Lakes. I'm Amy. Let's get connected. Today I'm excited to introduce you to my colleague and friend, Jamie Jones, family and psychiatric nurse practitioner. She is the owner and nurse practitioner of Intentional Wellness Solutions. She is married in a blended family and has a total of 6 children, 4 adults and 2 teens at home. She's an avid volunteer at Eagle Brook Church. Her dream has always been to give a TED Talk one day, but she's since revised that dream to be on an episode of SNL one day, due to her love of skit comedy. Welcome, Jamie. Thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So let's go ahead and introduce for our listeners, how did you come to the field and your clinical focus?
Well, honestly, the way I got into the field is a little bit complex and complicating, even for myself. But what I did is I had my second child in the hospital, and I thought, wow, being a mom baby nurse would be awesome. And long story short, after doing a clinical rotation, I realized there were a lot of sad stories. My heart couldn't handle it. And I did a psychiatric rotation that same semester and fell in love with mental health. So I took the long way about and worked in physical health, like in hospital settings, in clinic settings, and became a family nurse practitioner where I was treating like high blood pressure, diabetes, writing the prescriptions if you were sick with strep throat. And then realized, I'm really passionate about mental health. I need to go back to school. And by the time I did that, I realized that the typical healthcare setting wasn't the way that I wanted to help people. I felt like I could help them better by starting my own practice. So that's what I do now, is I see patients through my private practice and do a little bit of therapy and medication prescribing.
Awesome. I have had this privilege of being able to work as professionals together and get to know you personally too. And I feel like it's not necessarily uncommon to find providers who have gone the long way around and have been in different fields and understood the medical system in a different way. I kind of love that about the services that you provide, that you understand health and mental health now and keep building on that. I think that's really cool and really helpful for clients too.
Yeah, no, I love too that, understanding the physical side of things has allowed me to, like, let's say a person has migraines and they're having issues with sleep. There's medications that we use in the physical health world that we use in the mental health world, and we could just have one medication instead of having, 2 medications to treat the same thing. And so it works out well to have that knowledge and background to use. I feel like with medications, less is more in a lot of cases. So
yeah, no, I think clients and patients really appreciate that knowledge, and because that's not common for most people to understand, right? Medications are very complicated and it takes a lot to understand those things. So it's so nice to have someone that you can have that conversation with and understand better. The education piece is so important. It also really makes me think about the fact that in mental health, if we can't take care of the physical, it's going to be really hard to manage the mental health side of things.
100%. Because a lot of the times the physical ailments that we have are going to impact our mental health and how we're feeling anyways. So I feel like when I worked in primary care, so seeing people for their physical ailments, I enjoyed those sort of visits maybe even more, because I feel like when it comes to mental health, I feel like I'm missing a whole population of people that could benefit from being seen. So if they came to see me, for something physical, they felt okay. But I feel like there's a little bit of a stigma around mental health and people seeking out those services where they're like, oh, I'm not that weak, or I can talk through this with a friend, or I can get through this, I can tough this out. And a lot of the times, by the time people come to see me, it's like, man, I wish you would have come to see me sooner, because we could have got you feeling better. Life could have been a lot easier, and maybe it's It's tough because
No,
people
yeah.
were more receptive to it when I was in physical health, and
Yeah.
getting help sooner than what it is. It's like, oh, I'm going to reach out to her for mental health services.
No, I hear that all the time. We forget. We don't, it's not so much we forget, is we don't always know because it's not talked about that the brain is a physical piece of our body. It physically has chemical
Yep.
reactions that are contributing and causing a lot of these things. We like to disconnect the head from the body. Well, the body issues, yeah, we got to go in and take care of, but nothing up here, right? Nothing above the neck.
Which is crazy to me because if you think about it, from a professional athlete perspective, they have psychologists and medical staff on board, like so they can operate at their highest level of potential. So I'm like thinking, this is not a weak thing. Professional athletes also have staff on board, so this is a strong thing. This is what you do to perform at the highest level possible. So I'm like,
Exactly.
it's just
Exactly. And yeah, that's a huge stigma that we have to manage. And so I love that physical aspect and how it's just fact. It's just fact. It's an everyday
it is.
conversation for you. I love that. Okay, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about what kind of clients do you serve? So who walks through your door or into your virtual meetings?
So I see patients that are 18 plus.
Okay.
Basically, I love working with kids, but I love working with the decision makers. So I would say most commonly, and I'm gonna hate the word that I use, but I work with normal everyday people. And I'm like, what is normal? Normal is just, if you walked into a store, who are you gonna see? That would be the everyday human being that might just be in any public place. So a lot of the times it can be a person who is going to college and being away from their home for the first time, trying to navigate who they are as an adult. And I also see a lot of parents. I see a lot of business professionals. Pretty much anyone would be welcome to be a client of mine, but I would say those are the most commonly
Yeah.
seen. I love working with people after a divorce and when they're navigating, okay, what does life look like? Because that can totally reroute your whole life experience. And you're like, who am I? What do I even want to do? What do I, and then like when people are navigating the dating world. So pretty much I see normal everyday people that are over 18.
Got it. Got it. And what does a typical session kind of look like if someone to come in and they never experienced maybe the mental health world before? What does that look
That
like for them? And
that that's a really, really good question. When people come to see me, oftentimes they'll have said, I don't know what to expect from this. This is the first time I've ever talked to someone. I don't even know what's happening. I'm like, cool, you're in the right place. You don't have to know what's going on, because if I can't offer you the services that, we determine that you need, I am very well connected into the mental health world and we'll get you to go where you need to go. But most of the time they're in the right place. So what we talk about is just kind of like what led you to think that you want to talk to somebody, and what's going on in life, and getting to know what they've been through in their past, and kind of talking about what some of their strengths are and what they're looking to actually, what do they want to feel like, what do they want to get from that appointment. So it's very, I would say a lot of times by the time a person's done, they're like, I really enjoyed that. That was a lot easier than I thought. And a lot of times that's not what a person would think at the get-go. They're like, I'm very nervous. This is scary. And I'm like, okay, well, hopefully at future visits you'll recognize like, hey, it's just Jamie. She's, kind, she's easy to talk to. She's not going to judge me. It's a lot easier than what people expect.
oh, that's what I love so much about you and getting to know you personally and professionally, that aligns so well with kind of what I do as well as a marriage and family therapist. It's very much about, hey, let's go with where you're at. We don't have to make this scary. Let me actually get to know you a little bit and talk about fit. I mean, how empowering is that to have someone say, hey, you know what? If this isn't exactly what you're needing right now, let me help you figure that out.
Exactly.
And I think because our field is sometimes so overwhelmed that I don't think people always get that experience, but I love that. I know that they're going to get that from you. You do such a great job with that. Thank you.
Well,
I think that's so
thank
cool.
you.
And for people who are listening who haven't experienced this before, like that's what it should look like. That's what it should feel like, right? Being able to be seen and heard.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I was just going to say, for those who are looking to get in to see you, what is that process? Where do they go? What do they do?
Good question. So the easiest way to get an appointment is to go to my webpage, which is intentionalwellnesssolutions.com. And then if you scroll down just a little bit, there's a little box that a person can click and they fill out the paperwork. It is a little tedious, and but I do that for a reason. Like when a person comes in, I want to be able to take the time and kind of know a little bit about them, and it helps to like basically individualize and customize your first visit to be as comfortable as possible. So it's kind of tedious. It takes some time. I recommend doing it on a laptop. But once a person fills out that paperwork, usually within a couple hours, longest is within 24 business hours, we'll get an appointment scheduled. And
Oh, that's so awesome. Yeah, it is very tedious to fill out some of the mental health paperwork, and so vitally important so that we can take a look at that ahead of time. I know that's a similar process for my office too. That way I can get to know, and you don't have to say all the things in that first session, but we can kind of focus on the important stuff as well.
Absolutely.
Because I think that first appointment can feel like a flood of, I have so much I need to let them know, or I don't know where to start or what to say. So that paperwork ahead of time takes kind of the stress away. I think that's great. Sure. I will make sure to link in the information under the podcast or the video if you're on YouTube. I'll make sure to link that information so that you can get connected with Jamie if you need to. And for those who are asking or needing to know, like, how about payment and insurance and those kinds of things? How does that work for you?
So I accept most major insurances. So the only insurance that I'm not credentialed to take right now is Medicare. I do take Medicaid, and then most major commercial insurances.
Okay. Awesome. So I'm sure that'll all be part of the paperwork ahead of time if you're signing up for that. What are some resources that you would want to share with people that you find to be usually helpful?
Oh man, there's
what are
so
some
many.
of your go-tos maybe? Right.
I would say it would really depend on the person. There's so many different resources that are available, and depending on each person might depend what resource I might offer. But one of the most common ones, like especially for like men, is a TED Talk. Like there is a TED Talk on the term alpha male and how that term was coined. And basically it was a researcher of, I can't remember if it was chimpanzees or apes, but long story short, he created the term alpha male. What we call an alpha male, or what society calls an alpha male, is not actually what this researcher found. So a lot of the times in society, what people think an alpha male is some tough guy who doesn't show his emotions and is a bully and stronger, but it's not actually what an alpha male is. And so I felt like this TED Talk can be really helpful to kind of let people know, like, no, in reality, what is an alpha? What is a strong person? What does the research actually show, based off of this sort of research, what an alpha male actually is? And I feel that when men actually apply that, their lives become so much better, or they start to realize, oh my gosh, I'm a lot stronger than what I thought. Or so it's just kind of like debunking some of what inaccurate information society has put out there. So, but ultimately resources are going to be very much dependent on the individual. So whether it's a book or if a person is more inclined to listen to a podcast, or if they're more inclined to watch a video or a book, it's going to be very specific to that person, because I don't want to say, oh, hey, go read this book, when this person's like, I can't sit still. I don't even want to read. Right. So it might be an app for that person. So.
Oh, I love it. And there are some really awesome apps, podcasts, books out there that are super helpful. And I like the example of the alpha male. I've heard a little bit about that term that was coined, and it sounds to me that it really is something that we put on as a term for the animal kingdom. Like, we created it, not that it was innately created in nature anyway. So I'm curious. I will link that video as well under this podcast so you can take a look at it if you're curious, because I'm curious to see what more there is about that for men as well, because that's really interesting. So here's another fun question that I'd love to hear from you. What is one thing that you want to debunk about your job?
Okay, so I have two in my mind, but the main one, and I heard this a lot growing up, that people would say, you don't really need therapy. I have friends. Like, I can talk to my friends. And I kind of look at that as, okay, sure, you can talk to your friends. However, I feel like it's nice to have a third party that is educated in, psychology or mental health that you're able to talk to, because how do you know if your friend is actually giving you good advice or getting you to your optimal level? So I feel like a lot of times people are like, nope, I don't need mental health services because I have friends. Well, that's awesome, and I'm glad you do. However, I think that if people want to be able to optimize their life, talking with someone who's going to give you information that's based off of a social science in psychology would get you there faster.
Right. It's picking the resources, right? Like, friends are great resources. And when we're talking about level of care, right?
Exactly.
Someone who has maybe a degree or who does this on a regular basis has more connections and more resources to be able to provide. And you get to pick. You get to pick what resources work for you. It's always you get to choose. But friends aren't going to know anything about medications.
Or they might see you as their friend and kind of miss something, or if you're going through something extremely heavy, they might not be able to be there for you as much as, or to carry as big of a weight as, whatever the thing that you're going through is. And so having a professional, it's not like you're like, oh, okay, I got to not talk about this with them right now because I've been talking about it a lot. If you're talking with a professional, this is just what you do. Right.
We expect that. We want you to talk a lot.
Exactly.
And let's face it, our friends and family are going to have, and rightfully so, biases.
Yes.
They're going to look at this through a certain lens because they know you and they care for you. And sometimes that's not the most helpful.
And I think that it's awesome that you bring up that point, because as you know, like, ethically in the mental health world, working with friends or family is not even recommended at all because of that bias. So I just think it's, and I already know that for myself too. I'm like, I wouldn't even want to do that, but I feel like I would be missing something because of the information that I already have about this friend or family. And I wouldn't want to, it changes the dynamic of a relationship too. So, I wouldn't want to do that, but it's not even recommended.
Yeah, nope, definitely not recommended, and rightfully so. And for both people involved, for the professional and for the family member, it's just not going to feel the way that we want it to feel when you walk through and see a professional. Well, I encourage anyone who is thinking about reaching out, wanting to talk to someone about medication or getting different kind of help for their mental health, this would be a great option, getting connected with Jamie. Again, I will link all of the information that we talked about today and resources at the bottom. Check that out. And thank you so much for joining me, Jamie. It's been so much fun and such a pleasure. And
thank you so much for having me. This is awesome.
Great. Thanks everyone for
all
listening.
The work that you do.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. I'm so happy to be able to provide this. So, all right, guys, this is the legal stuff, the disclaimer. The podcast is intended for educational purposes only. The information provided is not a substitute for professional therapeutic advice or counseling. Always consult with a qualified mental health professional for any personal concerns or issues. The views expressed on this podcast are those of the host and guest and do not represent the views of any affiliated institution or organization. Listener discretion is advised.